Right now you are warm and you did not even have to think about it. The heat runs through your walls without you touching anything. There is a coat by your door you did not have to hunt, skin, or cure to make. There is food in your kitchen that will still be there next week, no matter how deep the frost gets outside. Now take all of that away. Just your body, your family, and a medieval winter so cold it could kill a person in their sleep before morning came. That used to be normal. Not for one hard season. For centuries, ordinary men and women across Europe faced winters that froze rivers solid, buried villages under snow for weeks, and killed livestock, crops, and children in the same month. And somehow they made it through. You are the proof. Every one of them survived long enough to pass life forward, which means every single one of them won a fight against winter they could not afford to lose. So how did they do it? How does a person with no central heating, no insulation, no preserved food industry, and no weather forecast survive winters that modern people would consider a catastrophe? That is what I want to show you, because it is one of the most ingenious survival stories in human history, and almost nobody knows how close medieval people came to not making it at all. Let us be honest about what they were actually facing, because a medieval winter sounds like a Christmas card, and it was nothing like that. Between 1300 and 1850, Europe entered a period historians now call the Little Ice Age. Temperatures dropped far below what anyone living today in those same regions experiences. The Thames in London froze thick enough to hold frost fairs, with fires burning on the ice. The Baltic Sea froze solid. Harvests failed across entire countries in the same year. In 1709, temperatures across Europe dropped so low that wine froze in bottles indoors. Birds fell dead from the sky, and the ground became too hard to bury the people who were dying. That was not the exception. Winters like that happened repeatedly across the medieval and early modern world, and the people facing them had none of what you have now. No insulation in their walls, no glass in most windows, no reliable way to store enough food through 4 or 5 months of cold. On paper, they should have been dying in enormous numbers every single winter. Many did, but the ones who survived did not survive by luck. They survived because they had built an entire system of solutions, and each solution fixed a problem that without it would have killed them. It started with fire. Everything in a medieval winter began and ended with fire. And the people who understood this were not casual about it. Medieval hearths, found in English manor houses and peasant cottages alike, show evidence of fires maintained continuously through winter months, never fully extinguished, fed through the night by whoever was awake. And here is something most people do not know. Medieval people burned more than wood. Peat cut from bogs in summer and dried through autumn burned longer and hotter than timber. In regions where wood was scarce, dried animal dung compressed into blocks kept fires alive for hours. Medieval fire was not a campfire. It was an engineered system built from whatever the landscape offered, tended like something alive, because in a real sense it was. A fire that had burned continuously since October, carried heat the stones around it had absorbed over weeks. Let it die in January, and you were not just cold for one night. You lost that stored warmth entirely. And rebuilding it from scratch in deep winter with wet wood and frozen hands could take days you did not have. Letting it die in January could mean not surviving February. Then they learned to trap the heat. The problem with fire is that stone walls and open windows drain warmth as fast as it is produced. So medieval builders did something that sounds simple, but took generations to refine. They made rooms smaller. A great hall with 40 people and a central fire holds warmth in an entirely different way than a large modern room with one person and radiators. The body heat of 40 people crowded into a low-ceilinged stone room with straw on the floor and heavy wool hangings on the walls is a measurable heat source. Medieval architects knew this without knowing the physics. The hanging tapestries that decorated wealthy homes were not decoration first, they were insulation. Wool against cold stone cut the chill radiating off the walls and kept warm air near the people who needed it. And here is something easy to miss. Medieval people did not fight the cold alone. They packed themselves together on purpose. More bodies under one roof than we would ever tolerate today, and that was not poverty. That was survival engineering. Servants slept near the hearth. not as a privilege, but as a practical arrangement that kept the fire watched and kept bodies warm through the night. In peasant cottages across England, France, and Germany, the entire family slept in a single room, often with livestock brought inside through the worst months. The animals gave off an enormous amount of body heat. A cow generates roughly the warmth of a small furnace. The family sleeping above them in a two-story cottage was not living with livestock out of desperation. They were living on top of their heating system. Staying warm kept you alive tonight. But winter's slower killer was hunger. From November through March, there was almost nothing growing and almost nothing to hunt that had not already retreated or been taken by others. So medieval people got extremely good at something modern people have almost entirely lost: preparing. The entire rhythm of the medieval year was built around getting ready for winter. Autumn was not a season of harvest celebration. It was a season of controlled panic. Grain had to be threshed and stored in dry conditions. Root vegetables had to be packed in sand in underground cellars where the earth kept them from freezing. Meat had to be salted, smoked, or dried before the cold made fresh kills scarce. Pigs were slaughtered in November specifically because the cold air preserved the meat naturally while the family worked through the curing process. And they wasted nothing. Every part of an animal was used. Fat rendered into tallow for candles and waterproofing. Bones boiled into broth that stretched a meal further than the meat alone could. Offal eaten immediately. Nothing left to rot because nothing could be replaced. Medieval food preservation had no power to go out in a storm, no machinery to break down, and no expiration date printed on anything. It worked because it had been refined across generations of winters where getting it wrong meant not surviving until spring. The hunting was organized too. Medieval communities maintained strict systems around who could hunt what and when, not purely for the benefit of lords, but because uncontrolled hunting in winter stripped the landscape of the animals that would need to repopulate come spring. The forests that surrounded medieval villages were managed resources, not wild spaces. Knowing which trees to cut, which to leave, which animals to take and which to protect, was knowledge passed from parent to child across generations. Lose it, and the next winter became significantly more dangerous. But that does not mean medieval winters were endured quietly. When cold and hunger pushed hard enough, medieval communities broke. Grain riots happened when stores ran low and the wealthy held back supplies. Desperate people moved across frozen landscapes looking for food in other villages, spreading illness as they went. Court records show that violence increased in the hardest winters, that communities turned inward, that the bonds holding people together frayed when survival itself was uncertain. And then there is the strangest defense of all. Some medieval people simply slept through the worst of it. Not fully, not like bears, but historical records from rural France and Russia describe a practice historians now call semi-hibernation, where peasant families in the deepest winter months would retreat to their beds, pull every blanket and fur they owned over themselves, reduce their eating to almost nothing, and sleep for 16 to 18 hours a day for weeks at a time, burning as few calories as possible, moving as little as possible, waiting. The cold was not a problem to be solved. It was a season to be outlasted, and the body itself, slowed and stilled, was the final tool they used to do it. For centuries, making it to spring was never guaranteed. Every winter was a test, and failing meant dying. Here is what gets me. In the space of a single lifetime, we went from banking fires through the night and sleeping with livestock for warmth, to tapping a phone screen and adjusting the temperature in our bedroom from under the covers. The most dangerous season medieval people ever faced is now something we complain about on the walk from a warm building to a warm car. Medieval people did not survive winter because they were tougher than us. They survived because they built a system refined across generations of failure and loss that worked even when everything else was trying to kill them. We did not replace that system. We just forgot we ever needed one.